The biting wind howls through the ravaged riverlands, a mournful song echoing the desolation left by war. Amidst the chaos and despair, a flicker of hope ignites in the most unlikely of places. We're talking about Ned Stark, you guys. Specifically, what if he didn't stay dead? Let's dive in. A small band of riders, cloaked and weathered, picks its way through the mud and debris. These aren't soldiers, not exactly. They're the Brotherhood without banners, a ragtag group of outlaws and rebels fighting for the common folk, doing what they can to make things right. You know, they're led by Lord Beric Dondarrion, a lord who has been raised from the dead multiple times, and the Red Priest Thoros of Myr, whose fiery faith will be pretty important here. Their mission is grim, somber, to retrieve the body of Eddard Stark. Word of his execution, though delivered with Lannister fanfare, hasn't extinguished the hope of some. Beric, guided by visions he believes are sent by the Lord of Light, sees a purpose for Ned beyond the grave. Now, we know what you're thinking, but hear us out. The Lannisters, surprisingly, didn't object to the return of Ned's remains to the north. Maybe they thought a dead Stark was less trouble than a living one. They handed over the body, expecting that to be the end of it. Boy, were they wrong. The Brotherhood intercepts the procession near the crossroads. A tense exchange ensues with the Stark guards escorting the body. These are loyal Northmen, grieving and wary. They're not keen on handing over their lord's remains to a bunch of outlaws. But Beric, with his unwavering conviction, and Thoros, with his soothing words, managed to convince them. A letter, purportedly from Catelyn Stark herself, seals the deal. Catelyn, desperate for any sign of hope, has authorized this unusual request. With Ned's body secured, the Brotherhood retreats to one of their hidden hideouts deep within the Riverlands. This isn't some grand castle or ancient temple. It's a simple cave, a refuge carved out of the earth, far from the prying eyes of lords and armies. Here, surrounded by flickering candlelight, they prepare for the ritual. Beric lays Ned's body on a makeshift altar, a rough-hewn table draped with furs. The air is thick with anticipation and a hint of dread. Even seasoned warriors are uneasy. Raising someone from the dead? That's not something you see every day, and it's not supposed to happen. But these aren't ordinary times, are they? Thoros of Myr steps forward. He's a stout man with a shaved head and a fiery beard. Once a court jester, he rediscovered his faith in the heat of battle, and now serves as the Brotherhood's spiritual guide, or as close as they get to it. He begins the ritual, his voice a low hum, chanting in the ancient tongue of Ashai. The woe. Words are strange, foreign, yet they resonate with a primal power. He lights a pyre, its flames casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. The heat intensifies, filling the air with the scent of burning wood and herbs. Thoros circles the altar, sprinkling fragrant oils and powders on Ned's body. Each movement is deliberate, precise, as if guided by an unseen force. The other members of the Brotherhood watch in silence, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. They've seen Thoros perform lesser miracles before, healing wounds and offering comfort. But this is different. This is pushing the boundaries of life and death itself. Thoros raises his arms, his voice rising in intensity. The chanting becomes a fervent prayer, a plea to the Lord of Light to restore life to the fallen Lord of Winterfell. The flames leap higher, casting an eerie glow on Ned's still face. He cleans the last of the blood with water and sets about preparing the body. "Lord of Light, hear my prayer!" Thoros cries out, his voice raw with emotion. "Grant us a miracle! Restore this man to life! He has a purpose to fulfill, a destiny to embrace." He pours what looks like dragon pepper all over the body. He takes a vial, pouring a liquid on a small cloth, and he cleans the wounds. He closes the broken eyes and says a soft prayer in Old Valyrian. The air crackles with energy. A tangible force seems to fill the cave, pressing down on everyone present. The candles flicker violently, threatening to extinguish. The temperature plummets despite the roaring fire. Thoros reaches for his sword, but this isn't just any sword. It's a blade imbued with the power of the Lord of Light. He draws it, and the steel erupts in flames, casting a blinding light. He walks slowly, his eyes closed, and his chanting grows in strength. He presses the flaming sword against Ned's chest, directly over his heart. A collective gasp fills the cave. The smell of burning flesh fills the air. But Thoros doesn't flinch. He holds the blade steady, channeling all his faith, all his energy into this single act. "By the power of R'hllor, I command you to live," he bellows. Suddenly, Ned's body jerks. His eyes snap open, wide and unfocused. He gasps for breath, his chest heaving. He's alive. Chaos erupts. Some of the Brotherhood members cry out in relief. Others recoil in fear. Ned stares blankly at the ceiling, his mind struggling to comprehend what has happened. He remembers the executioner's axe, the cold steel against his neck. He remembers the darkness, the void. And now, this. Light, noise, confusion. He tries to sit up, but his body is weak, unresponsive. He collapses back onto the altar, groaning, in pain. Thoros kneels beside him, his face filled with compassion. "Easy, my lord," he says gently. "You're safe now. You're with the Brotherhood." Ned struggles to focus on Thoros's face. What happened?" He croaks, his voice barely a whisper. "You were dead, Lord Stark," Thoros replies somberly. "But the Lord of Light has seen fit to return you to us." Ned stares at Thoros, then looks around the cave, taking in the faces of the Brotherhood members. He doesn't understand. He shouldn't be alive. He should be dead. He tries to speak again, but a wave of pain washes over him, silencing him. He closes his eyes, his mind reeling. He's back. But he's not the same. He can feel it. Something has changed. He's been to the other side, and he's brought something back with him. A darkness, a knowledge, a burning desire for justice. The resurrection of Ned Stark is complete, but it's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning. The Lord of Winterfell is back, but he's a changed man. He's been given a second chance, and he's determined to make the most of it. But what will he do with this new life? How will he reconcile his past with his present, and what role will he play in the wars to come? These are the questions that now plague Ned Stark, and the answers, we will see, will dramatically reshape the fate of Westeros. The game has changed, and the North is back in the fight with a vengeance. The echoes of the execution in King's Landing become a distant memory. A new fire burns within Ned now, one that will either consume him or forge him into something more. The scene fades to black. The embers of the pyre glow like angry eyes, and the saga continues. Whispers of resurrection. That's what they were calling it. Utter nonsense, the Lannisters scoffed, a desperate attempt by Stark loyalists to rally support. The Starks themselves, reeling from Robb's campaigns and Catelyn's grief, were skeptical, cautiously hopeful, but ultimately unsure what to believe. But in the ravaged Riverlands, a different story was unfolding. The Brotherhood without banners, always a thorn in the Lannisters' side, was now becoming a sharpened blade. Lord Beric Dondarrion, the Lightning Lord, rode at their head, his flaming sword a beacon of defiance. But beside him, a new figure emerged, a grim warrior clad in gray, his face weathered and hardened, his eyes holding a haunted intensity. He rode under a banner not seen in the South for too long, the direwolf of House Stark. Rumors spread like wildfire through the Riverlands, tales of daring raids on Lannister supply lines, of ambushes that left crimson rivers staining the green fields, of Lannister patrols vanishing without a trace. And at the heart of these stories, always, was the figure of a Stark, a resurrected lord leading the charge, his presence a chilling reminder of the Lannisters' treachery. At first, the stories were dismissed as mere fantasy, wishful thinking spun by desperate common folk. But then the reports became more detailed, more consistent. Witnesses spoke of a man who moved with a quiet authority, who spoke of justice and duty, who fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. They spoke of a man who looked remarkably like the late Lord Eddard Stark. The Lannisters tried to suppress the rumors, branding them as treasonous lies. They increased patrols, offered rewards for information, and even publicly displayed Ned Stark's skull atop a spike in King's Landing, a grim reminder of his execution. But the rumors only intensified. The people, weary of war and oppression, needed a symbol of hope, a beacon of resistance, and in this resurrected Stark, they found it. The Brotherhood's tactics changed. No longer were they simply harassing patrols and freeing prisoners. Now, under the leadership of this mysterious Stark, they were striking at the heart of Lannister power in the Riverlands. They targeted key supply depots, disrupting the flow of food and resources to Lannister armies. They liberated villages and towns from Lannister control, restoring order and dispensing justice in the name of the true king, whoever that may be. This Stark, they said, fought with a cold, methodical precision. He was a master strategist, anticipating Lannister moves and setting deadly traps. He was also a fierce warrior, leading the charge with unwavering courage, his sword a blur of steel, his every strike precise and lethal. Some whispered that he was fueled by vengeance, driven by a burning desire to avenge his family and his honor. Others claimed he was a righteous hand, guided by the gods to punish the wicked and protect the innocent. Adding credence to these rumors was the presence of Harwin, a former member of Ned Stark's household guard, now fighting alongside the Brotherhood. Harwin, loyal to the core, confirmed that this was indeed Lord Eddard Stark, returned from the grave. He spoke of the ritual performed by Thoros of Myre, of the power of the Lord of Light, and of the destiny that awaited Ned Stark. The news reached River Run, where Catelyn Stark, still consumed by grief and uncertainty, struggled to maintain order. She had received the bones returned by the Lannisters, but doubt gnawed at her. Could this really be Ned, or was it a cruel trick, a twisted game played by her enemies? Then, a letter arrived, delivered by a trusted messenger, bearing the unmistakable sigil of House Stark, the gray dire wolf on a white field. The handwriting was familiar, achingly so. It was Ned's. Catelyn's hands trembled as she unfolded the letter, her heart pounding in her chest. The words swam before her eyes, but she forced herself to read, her breath catching in her throat. Catelyn, the letter began, if you receive this, know that I live. I have been given a second chance. A chance to right the wrongs that have been committed, to protect our children, and to restore justice to this realm. I know this may be difficult to believe, but I swear to you, it is the truth. I am working with the Brotherhood without banners, fighting against the Lannisters in the Riverlands. I cannot reveal everything in this letter for fear it may fall into the wrong hands. But I urge you, come to me. Come to the Riverlands and see for yourself. Only then will you understand the truth. The letter was signed simply, Ned. Catelyn reread the letter again and again, her mind reeling. Could it be true? Could Ned really be alive? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. If it were true, it would mean that everything she had believed, everything she had accepted as fate, was wrong. It would mean that there was still hope, that the Starks could still rise again. But it could also be a trap, a cunning Lannister plot to lure her into the open, to capture her and use her as a bargaining chip. Or worse, it could be a cruel trick, a forgery designed to break her. Spirit completely. She confided in Sir Roderick Castle, her loyal master-at-arms, who listened with a mixture of skepticism and concern. "My lady," he said, "this could be a dangerous game. We cannot be certain of anything, but we cannot ignore it either. The rumors, the letter. It all points to something. We must investigate, but we must proceed with caution." Catelyn agreed. She decided to travel to the Riverlands, but not alone. She would take a strong escort, a force capable of defending her against any threat. She would also send word to Robb, informing him of the situation and requesting his guidance. The journey was fraught with danger. The Riverlands were a war zone, crawling with Lannister soldiers, bandits, and desperate refugees. Catelyn's party moved cautiously, avoiding major roads and sticking to the backwoods trails. They encountered several Lannister patrols, but managed to evade them thanks to Ser Roderick's experience and the skills of their scouts. As they traveled deeper into the Riverlands, they began to hear more and more stories about the resurrected, Stark. They spoke to villagers who had been liberated from Lannister control, who praised his justice and his compassion. They saw the destruction he had wrought on Lannister supply lines, the burned wagons and scattered supplies that littered the countryside. The evidence was mounting, but Catelyn remained cautious. She needed to see Ned with her own eyes, to hear his voice, to feel his touch. Only then would she be convinced. Finally, after weeks of travel, they reached the outskirts of a small village, a known stronghold of the Brotherhood without banners. Sir Roderick sent scouts ahead, who returned with a message. Lord Beric Dondarrion requested a meeting with Lady Catelyn Stark. Catelyn agreed, and the next day she rode into the village, accompanied by Sir Roderick and a small contingent of guards. The village was heavily fortified, with barricades erected on every street and armed men patrolling the walls. The atmosphere was tense, but the villagers greeted Catelyn with respect, their faces etched with hope. She was led to a small stone building in the center of the village, where Lord Beric Dondarrion awaited her. The Lightning Lord was a striking figure, his face scarred and weathered, his one good eye burning with intensity. His flaming sword rested on a table beside him, casting an eerie glow on the room. "Lady Catelyn," Beric said, his voice grave. "Welcome to our humble abode. We have been expecting you." Catelyn nodded, her eyes darting around the room. "Lord Beric," she said, "I have come to learn the truth. I have heard the rumors, read the letter. I need to know. Is it true? Is Ned alive?" Beric paused, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, Lady Catelyn," he said. "Ned is alive. He is here with us." Catelyn's heart skipped a beat. "I want to see him," she said. "I need to see him." Beric nodded. "He is waiting for you," he said. He turned and gestured to a doorway at the back of the room. "He is in the next chamber." Catelyn hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped towards the doorway. Sir Roderick moved to follow her, but Beric held up a hand. "Give them a moment alone," he said. Sir Roderick hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Catelyn crossed the threshold and entered the next chamber. It was a small, sparsely furnished room, lit by a single candle. And standing in the center of the room, his face etched in shadow, was Ned. Catelyn froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was him. It truly was him. He looked older, harder, his face marked by suffering and loss. But it was him. His eyes, his nose, the set of his jaw. It was Ned. "Catelyn," he said, his voice hoarse. Catelyn rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. "Ned!" she cried, throwing herself into his arms. He held her tightly, his arms trembling. "Catelyn," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." They stood there for a long time, embracing each other, their tears mingling. Catelyn felt the warmth of his body, the beat of his heart. It was real. He was real. Finally, they pulled apart, their eyes searching each other's faces. "How?" Catelyn asked, her voice choked with emotion. "How is this possible?" Ned took a deep breath. "It's a long story," he said. "But the short version is, I was revived by Thoros of Myr, through the power of the Lord of Light." Catelyn stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend. "The Lord of Light?" she said. "But you always scorned the Red Priests. You always followed the old gods." "I still do," Ned said, "but the Lord of Light has given me a second chance. I don't know why, but I intend to use it wisely." He told her about his execution, about his betrayal by the Lannisters, about his revival by Thoros of Myr. He told her about the Brotherhood without banners, about their fight against injustice and oppression. He told her about his plans to rally the North, to avenge his family, and to restore peace to the realm. Catelyn listened in silence, her heart filled with a mixture of grief, relief, and hope. She knew that this was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the past and create a better future. But she also knew that it would be a long and difficult road, filled with danger and uncertainty. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Ned looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "I want you to return to Riverrun," he said. "I want you to rally the Riverlands, to gather our forces, and to prepare for war. The Lannisters must be brought to justice, and the Iron Throne must be restored to its rightful heir." Catelyn nodded. "I will do it," she said. "I will do whatever it takes." And so, Catelyn Stark returned to Riverrun, her heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. She rallied the Riverlands, gathered her forces, and prepared for war. The whispers of resurrection had become a roar of defiance. The direwolf had returned, and the Lannisters would soon learn the true meaning of fear. When Robb and Catelyn initially heard that Ned's body was not among those brought by Hallis Mullen, they were struck with disbelief. Some were quick to label it a deception, a ploy by the Lannisters to further torment them, or perhaps even a failure on the part of the young guardsmen sent to retrieve the remains. But then, an undercurrent of stranger rumors began to circulate, whispers carried on the wind unlike anything they had encountered before. Everyone had heard tales of Lord Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr's daring escapades throughout the Riverlands, harrying Lannister patrols and leading raids against their supply lines, striking back at those who had brought ruin to the region. However, these new rumors spoke of something more. Something impossible. A new figure had joined the fray, these rumors said, a phantom leading raids with a ferocity and cunning that struck fear into the hearts of Lannister soldiers. This figure rode under a direwolf banner, his presence a chilling reminder of the North's unwavering resolve, and he declared himself to be Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell. At first, no one believed it. Least of all Robb, who struggled to reconcile the stories with the image of his father, lying cold and lifeless in King's Landing. How could it be? Was it some cruel jest, some elaborate scheme orchestrated by their enemies? But as the stories persisted, growing more detailed and consistent, and when they saw Harwin, a man they trusted, riding beside this mysterious figure, doubt began to creep into their minds. Could it be? Could their father, against all odds, have somehow returned? This Ned Stark struck with ruthless efficiency at the Lannister supply lines, ambushing columns of knights, scattering raiding parties, and forcing them to retreat empty-handed, if they retreated at all. While such actions were not entirely uncommon in the war-torn Riverlands, the persistent rumors of Ned Stark's resurrection were what truly caught the attention of all sides. The Lannisters, of course, tried to dismiss the tales, reminding everyone that Ned Stark had been publicly beheaded upon the steps of the Sept of Baelor in King's Landing. They presented witnesses, produced documents, and did everything in their power to quell the rising tide of belief, but their efforts were largely in vain. The rumors had taken root, fueled by the desperate hope of the Northmen and Riverlanders and the gnawing unease of their enemies. The Starks, meanwhile, sent men of their own to investigate. Experienced scouts and seasoned warriors were dispatched to the areas where the Ned Stark figure had been sighted, tasked with uncovering the truth, no matter how unbelievable it might seem. But before their scouts could return with any concrete findings, evidence arrived on their doorstep, an undeniable sign that something extraordinary was indeed happening. A letter arrived at River Run, bearing the unmistakable sigil of the direwolf. It was delivered by a weathered messenger, his face etched with exhaustion and awe. The letter was addressed to Lady Catelyn Stark, and when she saw the handwriting, her blood ran cold. It was a familiar script, one she had known and cherished for years. It was Ned's. For a moment, she could hardly breathe. Her hands trembled as she held the letter, the words blurring before her eyes. It was Ned's handwriting. There was no mistaking it. And as she began to read, she heard his voice in her mind, clear and distinct. It was as if he were standing beside her, speaking, the words himself. He urged her to march south, not with diplomats or envoys seeking peace, but with a force of arms, a host of Northmen and Riverlanders ready for war. He said that something significant was unfolding in the Reach, something that would determine the fate of the Seven Kingdoms, and that the North must be a part of it. He spoke of alliances and betrayals, of ancient prophecies and looming threats. He painted a picture of a world teetering on the brink of destruction, a world that desperately needed the strength and resolve of the Starks to survive. "This could be a trap, my lady," Sir Roderick Cassel cautioned, his voice laced with concern. "A way to lure our forces out into the open, ripe for a Lannister ambush. Or perhaps a desperate attempt by Tywin Lannister to make his escape from the Westerlands." Catelyn looked up from the letter, her gaze resolute. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't a trap. I know my husband's writing. I know his voice. And these rumors, these impossible rumors that he lives, they must have some truth to them." "Simple rumors, my lady," Sir Roderick countered. "Until we have more concrete evidence, everything related to Lord Eddard must be treated with the utmost caution. We cannot afford to act rashly, to risk the lives of our men based on unsubstantiated claims. And how will we ever know the truth if we are unwilling to take a chance?" Catelyn replied, her voice rising slightly. "How will we ever discover what is happening in the Reach if we remain here, huddled behind the walls of River Run, waiting for someone else to act? I will go. I will lead an army south, and I will see things for myself. With Robb away on campaign in the west, leading the Stark forces against the Lannisters, the only other significant army readily available belonged to House Bolton. Roose Bolton and his men were camped near the twins, biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Catelyn knew that relying on Bolton was a dangerous gamble, but she had little choice. She sent word to Roose, requesting his assistance, and to her surprise, he agreed to detach 3,000 of his men to join her on her journey south. Along the way, she sent riders to the River Lords, calling upon them to contribute troops for her march. House Mallister, House Blackwood, House Bracken, and others answered the call, sending their banners to rally alongside Catelyn. Another 4,000 men soon swelled her ranks, bolstering her forces and solidifying her resolve. They began the arduous process of gathering ships at Maidenpool, a vital port town along the Bay of Crabs. It was a slow and painstaking process, as ships were scarce, and many had been commandeered for the war effort. Weeks passed as they requisitioned vessels, hired sailors, and loaded supplies onto the creaking decks. By the time they had finally gathered enough ships to transport their army, word had already spread throughout the Seven Kingdoms. The rumors of Catelyn Stark's southern march had ignited the imaginations of the people, sparking hope in some and fear in others. Yet, despite the widespread knowledge of her movements, no one knew her true destination. To maintain an element of secrecy and to misdirect her enemies, Catelyn deliberately spread false rumors, making it seem as though she intended to capture Duskendale, a strategically important port town in the Crown Lands, or perhaps even to launch a direct assault on King's Landing itself. The Lannisters, predictably, reacted to these false rumors by tightening their defenses along the coast, reinforcing garrisons and positioning warships to intercept any potential invasion force. This paranoia and heightened state of alert allowed Catelyn and her fleet to slip out of Maidenpool undetected, navigating through the narrow straits and bypassing King's Landing, Duskendale, and other major ports without encountering any resistance. The Lannister forces were so focused on guarding against the expected attack that they failed to notice the true destination of Catelyn's fleet until it was too late. So no one was prepared when these ships made landfall in the Stormlands, just a few leagues north of Storm's End, the ancestral seat of House Baratheon. The arrival of the Stark and Tully banners on the shores of the Stormlands sent shockwaves throughout the region. By the time they arrived, they had already heard the news that they weren't the only ones there. After months of relative inactivity, Stannis Baratheon had finally emerged from Dragonstone, his island fortress, and had marched south, landing at Storm's End with the intention of laying siege to the castle. As the troops disembarked from the ships, their scouts reported that they had detected movement in the Rainwood, a dense and ancient forest that stretched along the coast. The scouts said that there was someone who wished to speak with them, someone who claimed to have vital information about the unfolding situation. Soon enough, a company of riders emerged from the Rainwood, their banners tattered and worn. They were the Brotherhood Without Banners, led by Lord Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr, a band of outlaws and rebels who had dedicated themselves to protecting the common folk of the Riverlands from the ravages of war. They approached the Stark and Tully encampment cautiously, their swords drawn, ready for a fight. Yet it was not the arrival of the Brotherhood that truly captured Catelyn's attention. It was the figure who rode at the head of their column, a man she thought she would never see again. It was Ned Stark. Catelyn froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Ned moved closer, guiding his horse slowly towards her. He was thinner then, she remembered. His face gaunt and lined, but his eyes were the same, filled with a familiar warmth and sadness. He wore simple leather armor, the dire wolf sigil emblazoned on his chest. He bowed his head stiffly, a gesture of respect and humility. "Catelyn," Ned said, his voice a low rasp. Catelyn stared at him, unable to speak. The years of grief and sorrow seemed to melt away, replaced by a surge of disbelief and overwhelming joy. "Ned," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Captain, my wife Catelyn," Ned corrected, himself, as if still adjusting to his return from the grave, or perhaps still hesitant to fully embrace the reality of their reunion. "No, this cannot be," Catelyn managed to say, her voice trembling. "I heard you were dead. I saw the reports. They claimed—" "I was," Ned interrupted, his gaze filled with pain. "I am sorry, Catelyn. Sorry that I could not protect our children. Sorry that this war has dragged you and Robb into its bloody embrace." The embrace. He would have said more, but Catelyn could no longer contain herself. She rushed forward, ignoring the protests of her guards, and threw her arms around him, embracing him tightly. Ned hesitated for only a moment, surprised by her sudden display of affection. Then he returned the gesture, wrapping his arms around her, holding her close. She could feel the warmth in him, the steady beat of his heart. It was real. He was alive. Her husband, her Ned, had somehow returned from the dead. "I don't care about that," Catelyn said, her voice muffled against his chest. "All that matters to me is that you are alive and that you are here now. As long as that is the case, we can find a way to fix things. We can find a way to bring peace to this broken land." As it turns out, we do have a way, Ned replied, his voice filled with a newfound determination. We must march south, to Storm's End immediately. There are decisions to be made, alliances to be forged. The fate of the Seven Kingdoms hangs in the balance, and we must do everything in our power to shape it. Soon after, the Brotherhood without banners rallied alongside the Northmen and Rivermen, formally cementing their alliance. It was just as Lord Beric had hoped. They could have easily revived Ned and sent him back to Winterfell to rally the North to their cause, but they knew that doing so would only make him a puppet, a tool to be used by others. They needed to win him over first, to convince him of the righteousness of their cause. By doing that, they could secure his unwavering support and ensure that his voice would be heard, that his ideas would be given due consideration. They wanted him as an equal, not merely as a figurehead, a lord who could enforce some of their ideas alongside them too, as equals instead of merely being a force of outlaws. When they arrived at Storm's End, they found two armies making camp opposite of each other, poised for battle. One was a smaller force, setting itself upon the shadows of Storm's End, close enough to lay siege to the castle, but far enough to avoid arrow fire and the worst of the defenders' attacks. They had set themselves up along uneven ground and close to a nearby wood, using the terrain to their advantage. The other was a much larger army, 5 times as large, camped a ways back beyond along the open plains, where their superior numbers could be brought to bear, and where their cavalry could have room to maneuver and run down their enemies. Ned, ever the diplomat, immediately sent messengers to both sides, requesting a meeting, saying that he wished to negotiate with them to find a way to avert the bloodshed that seemed inevitable. His sudden appearance and the rumors that swirled around him had piqued the interest of both Stannis and Renly, and they reluctantly agreed to meet with him. Soon enough, a tense meeting was conducted outside the walls of Storm's End, in a neutral clearing between the two opposing armies, where all 3 parties could gather without risking immediate conflict. Renly and Stannis eyed Ned warily, their gazes filled with suspicion and uncertainty. Their arrival had not gone unnoticed, and they both questioned what their intentions were, what role the Northmen and Riverlanders would play in the coming conflict. They both stared at Ned in surprise, slightly unnerved by his appearance. They all knew he was supposed to be dead, executed by the Lannisters in King's Landing. And yet, here he stood before them, alive and seemingly well. Neither one could truly explain how he had returned or why he was here. But neither had a chance to ponder it for long as he began to speak, his voice ringing out across the clearing. "Gentlemen," Ned began, his gaze sweeping across the faces of Stannis and Renly, "the time for division is not now. We stand at a crossroads, a time of great turmoil where our kingdom is at risk. As we sit here, bickering over titles and territories, a child sits upon the Iron Throne, a child we all agree is unworthy of it. So I ask you, what are you willing to do about it? Are you willing to set aside your personal ambitions, to unite against a common enemy, and to forge a better future for the Seven Kingdoms?" Stannis shifted uneasily, his jaw tightening. "I will not stand here and be chastised for taking action. I fully intend to march to King's Landing and confront the Lannisters. I am the rightful heir, and I will not allow them to usurp my throne." Renly scoffed. "Yet, both of you have seen fit to derail my plans because your plan involves you, claiming a seat that is not yours, brother. You have no right to the Iron Throne, Stannis. What you are doing is an act of opportunity, nothing more. You abandoned your duty, shirking your responsibilities as Lord of Dragonstone, and now you expect the realm to simply fall into your lap? And yet, the chivalry of the South rides behind me, brother," Renly continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The Stormlands, the Reach, and soon the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. The people have chosen their king. The people have declared their allegiance to me." Stannis snorted derisively. "The people? Where are these people? I see Florence, Tyrells, Hightowers, and Tarths. But where are the farmers, the smiths, and the fisher folk? You speak of the people, but you only surround yourself with lords and ladies, with knights and courtiers. You have no understanding of the common man, no empathy for their struggles. Renly bristled at the accusation. We speak for the people, Lord Renly, and we have proclaimed no one their king, not until the Iron Throne is ours. The people are not fire worshippers, Stannis continued, his gaze turning towards Ned and the Brotherhood without banners. You quickly claim to speak for the people, yet they would condemn you just as quickly. You bring only a fallen god and claim he justifies what you do, even as you raise a man from the dead. Better to raise a man from the dead than to leave him for dead, Ned retorted, his voice hardening. Lord Renly, do not act as if I did not approach you, Lord Stark. I offered you the opportunity to seize the crown, and yet you refused to do so until you didn't, and tried to bribe the gold cloaks. I did not abandon anyone. You left me no choice. With that, Renly turned and rode off, his face flushed with anger, leaving Stannis and Ned alone in the clearing. Once he was gone, Stannis cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence that had descended upon the meeting. So why are you back, Lord Stark? Stannis asked, his gaze fixed on Ned. I admit my knowledge of Roller is spotty, but he does not raise the dead on a whim. If you have returned, there is a purpose behind it, a reason for your resurrection. I wish to set the realm right, Ned replied, his voice firm, to put an end to the chaos that I helped bring about, to restore honor and justice to the Seven Kingdoms. Then you can count on my support, Stannis said, his gaze unwavering, so long as you bend the knee to me and acknowledge me as your rightful king. Begging your pardon, your grace, Ned replied, his voice respectful but unyielding. We have not declared for you either. And who is there left to claim? You have called Joffrey a traitor. You now condemn Renly. Tell me, who is there? Left to claim the Iron Throne? There is one more besides you, Stannis, Ned said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Jon Snow, the last son of Rhaegar Targaryen. Stannis stared at Ned, his expression unreadable. Is this some sort of joke, Stark? You're referring to your bastard, correct? You expect me to believe that he is some long-lost prince, hidden away in the north for all these years? I will give you credit, Lord Stark, Stannis continued, his voice laced with skepticism. You are more creative than people claim, but even that is difficult to swallow. If you doubt me, then ask your Red Woman if she sees it in her flames. Until then, we must consider what we do in battle tomorrow. Mist coils over the fields outside Storm's End, heavy and low, muffling the sounds of boots and hooves. Renly. Baratheon's host stretches across the plains in dazzling splendor. Bright banners of the Reach flutter proudly, polished steel gleaming in the pale dawn. Knights laugh confidently. Mounts whinny, and songs of victory are already being sung. They number more than 20,000 men. Renly rides at the front, resplendent in gold armor, his stag banner raised high above his head. Beside him, Sir Loras Tyrell watches the enemy lines with narrowed eyes. We crush them today. Before the sun sets, my brother will be dead or kneeling, but see that his body is not mistreated. Across the field, Stannis Baratheon holds firm. His forces are far fewer, 5,000, at most, yet they are disciplined and dug in. His infantry lines are braced behind ditches, sharpened stakes, and ridges that force any cavalry to slow. Archers wait silently behind makeshift earthworks, behind the main line. Renly gives the order. Trumpets blare. Thousands of hooves thunder. Forward. And the plain erupts with war cries. Arrows fire back at the charging horsemen, longbowmen raining arrows upon them. These arrows bounce easily off the plate of these knights. While it causes some damage and slows them slightly, it does. little to stop them, so instead they begin to target the horses, which are less heavily armored, and then the men begin to fall. Knights and free riders scream as their mounts are killed from underneath them. Soldiers scream and tumble, breaking the momentum of the charge as some fall and others are forced to dodge the tumbling men. This slowly breaks their charge and blunts their offensive power. Some rise to their feet and continue on foot, but the charge has lost its momentum. They find themselves pinned by the rows of sharpened stakes trying to remove them. But while they work, they find themselves facing a wall of pikes. At long last, they manage to come within grappling distance, and things start to even out. The army of Renly finally begins making headway as they drive the narrow seamen back due to their lack of high-quality armor. While they might have a local advantage in numbers, more and more Stormlanders and Reachmen pour in. Renly watches this and calls his reserves forward, prepared to have them finish off Stannis' army. The King of Dragonstone rides up and down the lines, rallying whoever he can and urging his men to fight on. But then, as the battle begins to tilt, the forest explodes. From within the woods to the north, a fresh host crashes into Renly's flank. A tide of Northmen, Riverlanders, and outlaws pours forth. Banners bearing the dire wolf of Stark, leaping trout of Tully, and the flayed man of Bolton alongside many more. At their head rides Ned Stark, alive and grim with Beric Dondarrion and Thoros at his side. Hold the line. Axes cleave through the Reach free riders. Brotherhood archers cut down confused riders. The Northmen roar as they slam into the enemy's rear, and 1,000 swords clash in choking fog. Sir Loras vanishes into the chaos, his rainbow guard overwhelmed. Stannis, seizing the moment, advances with cold precision. His foot soldiers surge from their defensive lines and strike Renly's disordered front. It becomes a slaughter. Within hours, Renly's grand army shatters. Lords flee or surrender, many abandoning their sigils in the dirt. Among the wreckage of golden tents, Renly Baratheon is found dead, slumped over, his gorget sliced open like hot butter. No one sees who strikes the blow. Some whispers of shadows. Others say it is justice, but he is dead. And with that, his army falls leaderless. With Renly's forces broken, many of the remaining lords and ladies pledge themselves to Stannis. And they are now ready to begin their march to King's Landing. Stannis now has the strength to advance and take the city, but before that, they gather to meet with the Northmen as Ned Stark requested. It is an unusual request, but they soon run into each other. Lord Stark, I have consulted with Melisandre, as you suggested. Lord Stark, you must have been keeping this story hidden for quite some time. I have seen it in the flames, so, you know, it is true. It is Lord Stark, the last son of Rhaegar, hidden right under your roof. What? No. What is she talking about? Jon Snow. He was never my son. That was simply a cover I created. In reality, he's my nephew. His true parents are Lyanna. Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. That revelation sends gasps echoing across the tent. Lords from all across the Seven Kingdoms stare at him in surprise. Some question these claims. Others deny them, calling him a liar and then simply want to know why. Ned gestures to all of them for silence. He raises his hands and takes a deep breath, finding his chest heavy as he recalls that day. Clenching his fists, he looks around, but then noticed Catelyn staring at him. She looked just as lost as anyone else, but when she hears her husband's confession, she nods to him, trying to calm him down. Slowly, Ned continues and reveals everything. He talks of the incident in the Tower of Joy, how he had found Lyanna after slaying the remaining King's Guard knights. And with Lyanna, he found her son, the only one to survive the birthing process. When Robert lived, Jon would have never been safe, but with him gone, it is at last time to reveal him. So why? Reveal him now? Unless you intend to crown him, A few of Stannis' men mutter darkly. They eye Ned suspiciously, wondering if this is all a farce, but he ignores them. His own Northmen rally around him and look ready to protect him should things come to blows. I am considering crowning him, but I do not intend to usurp you, your grace. I wish for my nephew to be married to your daughter, to join our houses, and to heal the rift we created, a marriage pact. That is what this is about. Ned, what are you saying? I am saying exactly what I mean. Your daughter will have a child of Baratheon and Targaryen blood. You will secure your rule. You will settle an ancient wrong. Surely that must account for something. Your grace, I will not agree to any of this on a whim, Lord Stark. I will meet this boy first, and then I will see if he's a worthy match for my daughter. It is far from what Ned would have liked, but those terms are acceptable. Stannis, Ned, and Beric combine their strengths and march north. Their armies swell as surviving lords abandon Joffrey's cause. The war drums faded. The icy grip of the White Walkers loosened. But the scars of conflict remained etched deep within the soul of Westeros. The aftermath of the battle for the Dawn brought both relief and a daunting task: rebuilding. With the Night King defeated, the immediate threat had passed, but the infrastructure of the North lay in ruins. Villages were decimated, and the psychological wounds of a near-extinction event were profound. Stannis, ever pragmatic, immediately began the process of consolidating his rule. With King's Landing secure and the major houses subdued, he turned his attention northward. He appointed capable administrators, tasked with distributing resources and overseeing the reconstruction efforts. Food, lumber, and tools flowed from the south, carried along the King's Road, now cleared of debris and banditry thanks to the combined efforts of the Brotherhood without banners and Stannis' own disciplined forces. But Stannis knew that rebuilding, more than just bricks and mortar, would be needed. The unity forged in the face of the White Walkers was fragile, a temporary alliance born of necessity. Old grudges lingered, and the inherent distrust between Northmen and Southerners ran deep. He needed a figurehead, someone respected and admired by both sides, to bridge the divide and lead the realm into an era of lasting peace. That figurehead, of course, was Jon Snow, now formally recognized as Dron Targaryen. The revelation of his true parentage had initially caused chaos and confusion, but Ned Stark's unwavering support and Melisandre's visions had swayed most to accept the truth. Dron possessed the rare ability to inspire loyalty and trust, a quality honed by his time in the Night's Watch and his unwavering commitment to protecting the realm. And so, Stannis proposed a grand council to be held at Winterfell to decide the future of Westeros. Representatives from all the major houses were invited: Lannisters, Tyrells, Greyjoys, Martells, and of course the Starks, Tullys, and Baratheons. The council was intended to be a forum for open discussion, a place where grievances could be aired and compromises reached. Stannis, ever the stickler for procedure, laid down strict rules of conduct, ensuring that the proceedings remained civil and productive. The journey to Winterfell was arduous, but the delegates arrived, their retinues filling the once-abandoned halls of the Stark ancestral home. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of hope and trepidation. The council began with Stannis laying out his vision for a unified Westeros, a realm ruled by justice and guided by reason. He spoke of the need for a strong central government, one that could enforce laws and protect its citizens from external threats. He also emphasized the importance of economic stability, proposing reforms to promote trade and industry. But the true turning point came when Dron stepped forward. He spoke not of power or politics, but of duty and sacrifice. He recounted his experiences in the Night's Watch, the harsh realities of life on the wall, and the unwavering courage of the men who stood guard against the darkness. He spoke of the wildlings, not as savages, but as fellow human beings, driven by desperation and a desire for survival. "We have seen what happens when we are divided," Drone said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "We have seen the consequences of greed and ambition. Let us not repeat those mistakes. Let us build a Westeros where everyone has a voice, where everyone is treated with respect, and where everyone has the opportunity to thrive." His words resonated with the delegates. Even the most hardened cynics were moved by his impassioned plea. The atmosphere in the hall shifted from suspicion to hope, from division to unity. Over the next few weeks, the council deliberated tirelessly, debating the merits of various proposals and hammering out compromises. There were disagreements, of course, but the spirit of cooperation prevailed. One of the most contentious issues was the future of the Iron Throne. Many argued that it should be abolished altogether, that the concept of a single ruler was inherently flawed. Others maintained that a strong central authority was necessary to maintain order and stability. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The Iron Throne would remain, but its power would be significantly curtailed. A council of lords and ladies, representing all the major regions of Westeros, would be established to advise the monarch and oversee the implementation of laws. Another key decision was the formal recognition of the wildlings as citizens of Westeros. Dron argued forcefully that they deserved a chance to integrate into society, to learn new skills, and to contribute to the rebuilding effort. He proposed a program of education and job training designed to help the wildlings adapt to their new lives. Stannis, initially hesitant, was eventually persuaded by Dron's arguments and the overwhelming support of the council. The council also addressed the issue of religious freedom. Melisandre, now a respected advisor to Stannis, argued that the Lord of Light should be recognized as the dominant faith in Westeros. However, Dron insisted on the importance of respecting all religious beliefs. He proposed a policy of tolerance, guaranteeing the right of everyone to worship as they pleased, as long as they did not harm others. Perhaps the most significant decision of the council was the agreement to establish a new institution, the Royal Westeros Academy. Inspired by the Citadel, but aiming for a broader scope, the Academy would serve as a center for learning and innovation, attracting scholars and scientists from all over the world. It would focus on practical skills, such as engineering, medicine, and agriculture, as well as theoretical knowledge, such as philosophy, history, and mathematics. The Academy was intended to be a symbol of Westeros's commitment to progress and a beacon of hope for future generations. With the major decisions made, the council drew to a close. Stannis, exhausted but satisfied, addressed the delegates one final time. "We have accomplished much here," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We have laid the foundation for a new Westeros, a realm of peace, justice, and prosperity. But our work is far from over. We must now return to our homes and put these principles into practice. We must show the world that Westeros is capable of greatness." The delegates dispersed, carrying with them the spirit of the council. As they traveled back to their respective regions, they began to implement the reforms agreed upon at Winterfell. Slowly but surely, Westeros began to heal. Villages were rebuilt, trade routes were re-established, and new schools and hospitals were constructed. The wildlings, integrated into society, began to contribute to the economy and enrich the culture. Dron, now hailed as the unifier of Westeros, traveled throughout the realm, visiting towns and villages, inspiring hope and encouraging cooperation. He worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between North and South, between old and new, between tradition and progress. He established new institutions, such as the Royal Westeros Academy, and promoted innovative solutions to the challenges facing the realm. One of Dron's most notable achievements was the development of new agricultural techniques. Inspired by the knowledge he had gained from the wildlings, he experimented with new crops and irrigation methods, increasing food production and reducing the risk of famine. He also promoted sustainable farming practices, protecting the environment and ensuring the long-term health of the land. Another area where Dron made a significant impact was medicine. He established new hospitals and clinics, providing access to health care for all citizens, regardless of their social status. He also encouraged research into new treatments and cures, attracting talented doctors and scientists from all over the world. But Dron's greatest legacy was his commitment to peace. He worked tirelessly to resolve conflicts peacefully, mediating between warring factions and promoting dialogue between different cultures. He established a new code of conduct for warfare, prohibiting the use of torture and ensuring the humane treatment of prisoners. He also advocated for disarmament, reducing the size of the armies and investing in education and social programs instead. Under Dron's leadership, Westeros entered a golden age of peace and prosperity. The realm flourished, its people united and its culture vibrant. The scars of the past began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and optimism for the future. But even in this new era of peace, the memory of the long night remained. The threat of the White Walkers had been vanquished, but the knowledge that such horrors could exist lingered in the hearts and minds of the people. And so Dron, with the support of Stannis and the Council, established a new institution, the Order of the Dawn. The Order of the Dawn was a brotherhood of knights and scholars, dedicated to studying the history of the White Walkers, researching new methods of defense, and guarding against any future threats. They established outposts along the wall, monitoring the lands beyond and providing assistance to any travelers who ventured into the frozen wastes. They also maintained a vast library of knowledge, collecting all the available information about the White Walkers and their origins. The Order of the Dawn served as a constant reminder of the importance of vigilance and preparedness. They ensured that Westeros would never again be caught off guard by the forces of darkness. And so, the realm entered a new era, an era of peace, prosperity, and vigilance. The long night had been averted, but the lessons learned would never be forgotten. The scars of the past had been transformed into a source of strength, a reminder of the importance of unity, compassion, and unwavering courage. And with Dron Targaryen at the helm, Westeros stood ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The new era of peace and rebuilding had begun, a testament to the enduring spirit of the human heart and the power of hope in the face of darkness. The realm at last could start to breathe easily once more.